Kalispera, good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to welcome you to this conversation in Delphi, a place where people once came to hear about the future. Now, the future no longer whispers through oracles, it screams. It screams through data streams, through AI models, through blockchains, and through distributed ledger technology. The challenge isn't predicting the future, it's about designing it to be used in a responsible way. Now, I work in Citi. I'm in our Citi Institute, which is our thought leadership division, and I think and I write about the future of finance and money in the form of reports. They look a little bit like this, and we also talk about the risks and the challenges. Now, as a former financial services regulator in the UK and France, I've seen the trade-offs up close, the need to protect consumers, systems, and markets, but also not to stifle them. And as finance is becoming increasingly driven by code, intelligence, and decentralization technologies, we have to ask ourselves, are our institutions on the public side and on the private side ready to govern a world where the speed of innovation outpaces the speed of oversight? And to explore this tension, right, with the exam question we've been set, the tension between innovation and risk, we've brought together a very diverse group of leaders shaping different pieces of the puzzle. Now, I'm not going to be reading out my panelists' biography when I introduce them. You'll find it in the agenda on the conference app. And quite frankly, I don't have time to do justice to the collective experience and influence that I have on the stage with me today. Trust me when I say this is a heavyweight panel. We are in safe hands. So, immediately next to me, we have Nico Gariboldi from Pfizer. You're going to bring the perspective of the health sector, where digital innovation can save lives, but also raises questions about privacy, data, ethics, and resilience. Next to Nico, we have Petros Koumoutsakos, a professor at Harvard. You work on the forefront of computing and engineering, and as we were chatting outside, you told me you're currently doing a placement with DeepMind, apologies for that, DeepMind. And next to Petros, we have Federico Menna, the CEO of EIT Digital, representing the pulse of the European tech and innovation sector. And last but not least, we have Ilias Tsintavis, a partner at Michael Kyprianou & Co. And you are also a founder of a fintech company. You wear two hats, so you will bring both perspectives. Now, each of these speakers comes from a different domain, as you've just heard, but I think the stakes are shared. This is a connected world, as per the title of our session, and I think risk doesn't stay alone in its siloed lane, and neither should innovation. So with that, let's begin. And I'm going to start with an opening question. Let's go down the line. It's a question to all of you, really. I'd like to know, what is the biggest trade-off your industry currently faces when trying to scale innovation responsibly?
So I would say, first of all, if I think about our company and also the sector that we are in, it's really important, this discussion, because in some way, as you can imagine, we are talking about patients. So this is the first comment that I want to make, and we have always to be sure to deliver, I would say, quality and safety in terms of products to our patients. So, but in some way, there are a couple of components that I would say, a couple of trade-offs that I would say, especially for our company, we should take into consideration. One is the balance, is thoroughness and speed. So this is really important, because in some way, if you think especially about pharma, so, and also, I don't know, we are from Pfizer, you know the case of the vaccine for sure, but in our sector, and also in our company, we have a strong sense of urgency. So this is really important, urgency, sorry, because in some way, we want to deliver for save patients' life, for improving patients' life, but at the same time, we have also to respect a very strict regulatory environment. We have to deliver safe products. So this is the first, I would say, trade-off that we have always to take into consideration. So from one side, we have the speed for delivering to patients quickly and also in the best way. On the other side, we have to be very rigorous respecting regulatory requirements and respecting quality and safety of our product, and also in some way managing, for example, all the development of drugs in the right way so that our products for patients will be perfect. So this is the first one. The second one, always if we talk about innovation, is in some way the way that we are approaching to this. So because as you may know, our company in general, I would say in pharma, we can make innovation in two ways. We can make it internally with our teams, I would say of research and development, but we can make it also externally. So sometimes we recognize, for example, that small companies, so especially small biotech companies, could give a lot, I would say, in terms of innovation, could give new capabilities, new technology. And here the trade-off is that it's a way, we are a giant, but we are always very respectful in terms of compliance, in terms of safety. And sometimes we have to have the same standards also to the small companies that we are having. So
you mean startups, for example?
Yeah, I would say it could be startup, but especially the pharma biotech, small biotech companies. So these are the two main, I would say, trade-offs that we should make for innovation.
Really interesting. Petros, the same question to you. Biggest trade-off your industry faces. I don't know if you want to answer that from an academic perspective or perhaps with your current placement.
My main hat is academic perspective, because I will try a little bit of both, if you don't mind. So as a professor working at Harvard, the key topic of our work is to do research in fundamental science. And I think fundamental science is the mother of innovation. This is where many ideas eventually find their way into becoming technologies that today are governing the whole world. It's not an accident that from the undergraduates of Harvard, you have people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, who came up with a certain style of education that tells them how you can take fundamental things and you can apply them into innovations, and innovations that are changing the world. Speaking of Harvard, again, another important thing that we have as professors there is the education of the next generation. And what's happening now with AI is we try to find ways that all these powers that AI is bringing, generative AI and so on, to use them not as obstacles to the education of these people, but as you try to create the innovators of the future, you try to think what kind of an education should you give them? How do you balance fundamental science, capabilities of AI, so these people can go ahead and innovate tomorrow? So in our industry, finding ways of translating fundamental science, academia, in fundamental science into innovation is a key thing that we translate, first of all, in our education and the research we do. At the moment, I do a sabbatical. I am at DeepMind in London. It's an eye-opening experience to see how industry is working. I am in the weather team, and the weather team is trying to forecast the weather, which is an amazing capability that has a lot of applications from agriculture to health to defense to the entertainment industry. And the key thing that we try to do is we try to do forecasts with quantified uncertainty. And I think being able to predict things in the future, and at the same time, you never say the temperature will be 20 degrees, but you say it will be 20 degrees with 80%. Giving this 80% is a big art, and it requires a lot of research, and there is an amazing amount of innovation that goes into putting numbers behind these probabilities.
Thank you. Over to you for the European perspective, Federico. You represent also the startup ecosystem in Europe. What's the biggest trade-off you're facing when trying to scale innovation responsibly?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, for us, indeed, we are in the middle of a triangle between the policymakers, the European Commission. We advise the Commission on regulation. We have the large industry partners in our ecosystem, and then we have the startup, the scale-ups, and a lot of SMEs. So it's all about a trade-off. I think the biggest trade-off for us is to find, depending on the sector and on the application, where is the line between innovation and regulation. We see more and more that there is no fixed border. We see that obviously, when you are in the health sector, is way different than being in Industry 5.0, and machine data is very, very different from human being data. So our advice is always to look at the sector, take a risk, but also be responsible, because in the end, as you said, we want to grow sustainably. And typically, we offer scenarios. We say, okay, if you move in this direction, this is going to happen. You over-regulate, well, maybe then only the big tech will make it, and the startups will all be killed. If you under-regulate, maybe something else will happen. So the biggest trade-off in my sector is really to find the right balance, depending on the sector and depending on the application.
Ilias, from the legal perspective or even from a fintech founder perspective, what do you think?
I think that the key element here is balancing speed versus certainty. And at least from the legal perspective, things are straightforward. Compliance, risk mitigation are paramount in our line of business. From a founder's perspective, if I don't have schizophrenia in 5 years, that'll be a miracle, because at the same time that you're doing risk mitigation and compliance, you also find that you want to drive forward at the same time, where you have to do this balancing internal in your head. But what I would like to say is that, in general, innovators are high-speed cars, they're rocket ships. Meantime, business will be a few turns behind, but still very, very forward. Compliance and risk mitigation will be 5 steps behind. And what I do believe is paramount here is giving them the right rules of the game from the beginning, so that you can tell them, guys, you can innovate. What you from the innovation that you create, this we can put into practical business use. The rest need time. If you are straight with them, and if you give them a right mandate, then you will avoid frustration, then you're going to avoid them getting put back, because what they've developed, which may be amazing technology, but amazing technology doesn't always translate into a business usable model.
Yes, thank you for that. Federico, I want to come back to you and pick up a little bit on the point you made about the line between innovation and regulation, which can move. Now, if you think about what the US is doing now under President Trump, they're pursuing a deregulation agenda, particularly so in the financial services space, right? With what they're doing with digital assets, crypto, AI, and so forth. So I guess my question to you is, when you look at what the US is doing, do you think other countries are going to follow suit to remain competitive? And in particular, given your European remit, what do you think Europe should be doing? Would you say they are already showing signs of a path to deregulation, given the Commission has withdrawn 3 regulatory proposals, you know, like we saw with the patents, the AI piece, the AI liability piece, and privacy? What do you think? What should Europe be doing?
Yeah, it's of course a very good question. The first part, yeah, I do expect that some other countries will follow, obviously, in other parts of the world. I don't think Europe will follow. Yes, of course, you made some examples, and I think it's good that we went in that direction. But I don't think the solution is the regulation. Europe, in a way, is always seen as the place where regulation happens and innovation lags behind. At the same time, Europe has also shown when, as I like to say, when regulation is done with foresight, preparation, and boldness, then things can happen in the right way. I think GDPR is an example. Then, of course, we can discuss ours on that. So in my view, what Europe needs to do is to, first of all, develop sector-specific approaches, as I said in my opening remark, but also work more, and when I say more, it's significantly more, on creating the so-called regulatory sandboxes to allow innovators to test in a safe environment, allow them to test the speed, but also make sure that when it comes to the real game, we are also respecting European values. In the end, we are all proud about the European way of life, and we want that to continue in a sustainable way. And I couldn't agree more that we also need clear rules from the beginning. All these changes all the time are not helping anyone, so it's good to define the rules, and again, they need to be defined with foresight and preparation, because otherwise continuous changes will hinder innovation.
Absolutely, and I would double click on the regulatory sandbox point. I'm based in the UK, and in fact, if my sort of history and facts are right, the UK regulator, my former employer, the Financial Conduct Authority, was the first one in the world to set it up in, I think it was back in 2016 when I joined Citi, and since then it's really had a ripple effect across the world. We've seen these regulatory sandboxes be regulated and tweaked to the local environment globally, and we have the first European regulatory sandbox specifically for AI under the EU AI Act that's been set up in Spain. Really good examples bringing both the private and the public sector together to test out innovation to see to what degree it complies with, regulations as they're coming up. Ilias, I want to come to you, and I want to pick on one of the most overused phrases in policy circles, and I think you're probably best placed to answer that, given you cover both the legal side and the fintech founder side. We talk in the industry about same activity, same risk, same regulation. So if you've got two firms that are offering the same activity, that pose the same level of risk, then the same regulations should apply. It should be a level playing field. But in practice, is it realistic or even desirable, given how differently fintechs are built versus banks or the TradFi sector? They're very different beasts, if I can put it that way. We've seen over the years fintechs operate under a lighter regulatory regime than banks. So does that give them an unfair advantage? Or would you say it's a necessary condition so that innovation can thrive? What do you think?
I think that the playing field must be level. Rules should be the same for everyone, but the two are not alike. A bank and an EMI or a fintech, they're not the same. The bank is a battleship. It needs to be robust, it needs to be thorough, it needs to be able to withstand financial crisis. It's the impact that a bank has is significantly higher than that of a fintech or an EMI. Now, on a fintech and EMI, if you put it on the regulatory burden of a bank, they're going to go bankrupt in a week. That's it. Fintech needs to decide quickly. We have a question, we need a decision in the next 15 minutes. People move on, go, run. On a bank, to make a decision, when we sit at a committee, it will take us 3 months. We'll have 3 reports that come in from other certified professionals, and it's going to cost 150,000 to make a decision. A fintech cannot survive this. But from my perspective, the key element here is impact. The impact of a fintech or a small EMI going bad is going to be tiny. Bank will just absorb it, write it off, easy. And the impact of a bank going down is significant. It has contagious effect. It has a lot of ripple effect in the economy, and that can be very serious. So by starting from an impact point of view on what will happen is where I see that the regulation enables a lighter framework for the fintechs and the lighter regulated to give them a boost. And very often, there's a symbiotic relationship. I'll give you an example on our fintech. Somebody can open a bank account with us, but we don't hold a bank account and we don't hold the money. The bank does. We obtain this as a service from bank. So yes, we're lighter regulated with much less capital requirements, with much less risk assessments, because we delegate a lot of it to a bank, and we split our revenue with a bank. So it's symbiotic. It can be symbiotic. And there is no way that you can give innovation a boost without splitting the regulatory burden to go along with the impact that it will have if something goes wrong.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to pick up on one of the points you mentioned. You talked about fintechs needing answers and clarity really fast, right? Otherwise, they're going to run out of money. They're going to run out of funding. We won't have any innovation. There won't be any fintechs. I mean, I guess question for you or anyone really. Do you think regulators are equipped to answer fast? Are they set up in a way to give quick answers? I'm being a bit provocative here. What do you think? Yes.
For me, it depends. So, not yet, I would say.
There's hope?
Yes.
There's hope.
Sure. Yeah, yes, for sure. I think there's hope. In some way, I think what is important is that we work together on that. So, because in some way, I think we need them, and for sure they need us in terms, I would say, of development of the economy. But in some way, as I said, important for us that they should be able to define very clear guidelines. So, this is also something that fits very well with our needs, but also this framework, together with defining clear guidelines, also should be supportive of experimentation and innovation. So this is something really important. So be able, for example, to funding research and development, to provide a benefit in tax for startups. So I think it's a way, it's not easy, especially for the speed of innovation that we are currently having, but for sure if we are working together on that, this could be the best way for in some way making innovation together.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to weigh in?
We're throwing a lot at the regulators, and yes, there is hope, and no, I don't think that any regulator is ready for the challenges that innovation brings in, and what innovation will bring in a few years to come. There's many that believe that our house will have a robotic assistant in the next 10 years, or even much sooner. That will be a computer system driven by AI that will be empowered to navigate your house, your family, your finances, order things, receive things, do many things that a human can do. And expecting from a regulator to be able to proactively regulate all this, that brings in so many different sectors of innovative technology, is impossible. Regulation always follows behind because people need to innovate for the regulator to see, do the impact assessment, and bring it forward. But I think there's hope because, at least in the European Union, we do have a decent, very good, I would call it a good level of regulatory clarity when it comes to payments and digital methods of payment. We're good. We have a working framework. It's not perfect.
You mean with PSD2 and now PSD3 coming up,
PSD2,
for example?
MIFID, PSD2, MICAR. We have enough. We cannot get greedy. We have enough to build upon, and we have enough certainty. Now, is it imperfect? Yes, of course it is imperfect. But will it improve? Yes, of course it will improve. MIFID 2 is better than MIFID 1. There's going to be more consumer protection whilst the stakeholders in the industry have figured out how to do what they need to do safely and efficiently. So there's definitely hope.
Good.
Yeah,
yes.
I agree, there is hope. One thing that maybe I would like to highlight is that in many cases we see that at European level we have this preparation, but then some even regulation that is done in the way I said before with foresight is then translated into 27 different sub-regulations with more or less the same but not the same, that in the end creates more confusion than the rest. Of course, I know it's not easy, but there is hope, and I think that every time we see a new piece of regulation coming up, we see that this harmonization is coming. So there is definitely hope, but we still have to work on it.
You heard it here. There's hope. This is a very positive panel. Wonderful. I want to flip gears a little bit and touch on the topic of trust. Nico, I'm looking at you. How do you build trust with the public and with regulators when you're innovating, you know, Pfizer innovating in life-critical areas at scale and with speed? How on earth do you build trust?
I think this is one of the most important topics for our company. So if I think about our guiding principle in our blueprint, in our value, this is really one of the most important ones. So building trust, as you said, with institutions and with regulators. And I think that we did really a lot on that, even because if I think especially the two maybe most important components with which we can also get trust, especially if we talk about drugs, is, for example, the way that we are sharing data. When we develop, we are in the development phase of our drugs. So we are always sharing transparently all the results, for example, of these processes that we are doing in both cases, if they are positive, if they are negative. So this is creating a lot of trust with our stakeholders. But also another thing that is creating a lot of trust from this perspective, as you correctly said, so we are talking about the life of patients. It's also the standards that we are keeping, for example, in manufacturing. So always high standards for manufacturing. This is guaranteeing in some way also the good relationship with the institution. But also, I think these are two examples. But also what is really key in Pfizer is the approach that we are having with that. So it's a framework that we created. As you know well, ESG now, it's really important for every company, environmental, social, and also governmental. So I think that the 6 principles that we defined for building this relationship of trust with the institution, they are really important. And even the board of directors of our company are working for monitoring this type of results. And when I'm talking about these principles, I'm talking about product innovation. So we are all devoted to create new products for serving new needs of patients. I'm talking about equitable access and also pricing of products, about quality and safety, diversity and inclusion, business ethics and climate change. So I think that every one of us in our operation is respecting these principles, and this is creating a lot of trust with institutions.
Thank you. That was really comprehensive. Petros, I would like to come to you now, and I want to pick on the topic of risk as per our title. I really want to dive into risk. Now, we know AI and computational science, they're accelerating discovery, but they also raise new systemic risks. And I guess my question to you is, what risks do you believe we do not yet fully understand or appreciate in high-stakes applications or sectors like, I don't know, healthcare, you just heard from Nico, but also like in financial services? What do you think?
Yes. Allow me to, since I am a mathematician, to bring it into mathematics. Risk is the product of what you're about to lose times the probability of losing it. And the first component, which is the value of what you are about to lose, I think very often people in financial industry, in health and in other areas, they don't really know how to put a number around that. And I think it should be something where AI, modeling, mathematics should be able to help people to put a number and not only to talk about words about what is the value of losing something. Now, the second part of the product is the calculation of the probability of losing something. And this probability, we live today in a time of data, and this probability is very well defined. We have opportunities today to define these probabilities thanks to data, and this is where AI is coming in and is helping us to discover a different scenario and to discover how to quantify these probabilities, not only based on priors that we have in our minds about this is going to happen with this probability, but with hard evidence. So I find AI and computing to be two key components in risk, and I would hope that many industries, like finance and health, will adopt this quantitative approach a little bit more. There is a third component, which is that risk is never one risk. I think, as we all know, even from our personal lives, when we are thinking about one risk, it's not only one. There's 10 different risks that we are weighing around on our head. And again, the human mind has limitations. And this is where places like generative AI may come and help you to give you, in front of you, a set of different possibilities, different risks, and it can help you to guide you in the decision that you are taking.
Like a menu of risks.
A menu of risks, and then the human factor comes in, and then at least you have them in front of you, because very often we take risks without knowing what other options we may have in front of us.
Nico, you just heard Petros talk about quantifying risks and how to do that. Do you adopt this type of approach in Pfizer?
Yes, for sure. I would say, I think it's part of the game. But in some way, especially if we talk about technology and also the application of technology to the work that we are doing, I think, and I think about especially AI. Also, the discussion is always about this. But this is a risk that I think it's not correct to say a risk that we have to take. I think the best way is saying is a risk that we have to manage. So, because in some way, if we are going to lose this type of, I would say, of opportunity with this type of technology, this will impact for sure what we can deliver to patients. This will impact drug discovery, the drug development. So, in some way, as I said, we are really keen to advance technology, to advance innovation, but also we want to manage risk, even because we cannot afford or compromise safety, or I would say, or also the goodness of our product. So, as I said, for sure, we are taking risk, but better we are managing risk for making innovation.
And just on that topic of risk, maybe opening it up to Ilias as well, and Federico, maybe if you can name sort of one risk you think we should feel more comfortable in accepting, what would you say that is for your sectors?
For our sector, I would say blockchain technology would be the one that...
Sorry, what kind of technology?
Blockchain technology.
Blockchain technology,
blockchain technology,
DLT, distributed ledger technology.
Distributed ledger technology is the one that I feel that people need to start familiarizing themselves with. AI is there. I take AI for granted, but the reason I say this is that there's so many practical implementation of the technology that are seeing the light, which is completely different than the reputation that it had until now, which is crypto scams, volatility, rug pulls, all the things that went with crypto. Whereas that's not what blockchain technology is. We see loads of practical implementations of it that are groundbreaking, and I think that inevitably this will find itself into our lives in one way or another, even if we don't even realize it. We may not understand that this technology has been leveraged to make something happen.
That's right, and that's when it will become big, right? When you start using it, but you don't know what the actual technology is. I'm sure many of you in the room watch Netflix, right? Hands up, who watches Netflix? Right, okay, that's pretty much everyone. Good, that's what I was hoping. We don't all we care is that it works and that there's a good menu of shows available. We don't care what technology is powering it. And we think, that's when blockchain will become really big as well, right? We actually write about it in our reports. I mentioned in my intro that we write reports, and we think the killer use case, blockchain will have its ChatGPT moment. The killer use case for that is tokenization, and it will become very big, but it will take time because it is a very different type of technology to the other one you mentioned, Ilias, which is AI. Blockchain is a back-end infrastructure technology, a bit more difficult to understand the impact that it could have, right? And it also helps us transfer value, money, even across borders. When you're starting to touch money, you're starting to touch highly regulated areas. But slowly, we've seen various institutions do multiple pilots with it, get their hands into it, really big corporations as well, but also governments, and with what they're doing with the future of money, with the digital euro, central bank digital currencies, some of which, not all, but we write in our report, maybe 50% or less, but some will certainly be using DLT for that. So yes, it will become big. I would, that really resonates. I would echo that. Anyone else? Another risk we should feel more comfortable accepting? Federico or Petros?
I can go quick. I have two, given that we are an ecosystem and we work in the middle of this triangle, I said. The first one, of course, for innovators is the risk of failure. In the end, we have to learn in Europe to be more agile and also to accept that sometimes an entrepreneurial idea may not fly, but we have to learn and restart quicker and in a more impactful way. And the second one, when I look at the regulation, a risk that we should avoid in a way by also working on skills and awareness raising is acceptance of technology, because very often we talk among specialists and we know what we are talking about, but the population sometimes doesn't understand. So we need to work on this to make sure that we manage this risk of technology not being accepted, because sometimes the risk is big just because people don't know. In the end, effectively, it's not that huge, but if people don't know, they will not accept it. And this is a big risk if we want to innovate, especially as Europeans.
Absolutely. Petros?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is amazing in the US is that people invest in fundamental science, and some of the best risk takers that you will find are the people who advance science, because these are the people who say, what if? And then they jump and they do it. And in Europe, there is much less emphasis on fundamental science, and in Europe, even less. So I think one of the risks that I can advocate for my colleagues who work in the industry is to trust scientists and give them projects where they can take risks, because even with this probability product that I mentioned earlier, if 1 in 100 gives you 1,000 factor of profit, it's something, a risk worth taking.
In science, we trust.
In science, we should trust.
In science, we should trust. Do you have anything to add? Okay. I'm just looking at the timer at the back. We're sort of coming to the end of the session. I will ask one more question to each of you. We'll go down the line. We'll start with Ilias, and we'll work towards me. My question is this: what is the one piece of advice you would give to policymakers trying to foster innovation but not losing control of risk and oversight? Your one piece of advice to policymaker. Imagine this room is full of policymakers, supervisors, and regulators. Here's your chance. Here's your pitch. Give me your pitch.
Listen to what the innovators want to achieve, and to the extent that it's compatible with our goals, our aims, and our ideals, make it happen.
Make it happen. And listen first.
I would say work on scenarios, and don't be afraid of moving along those scenarios. Take some risk yourself if you want innovators to take risks.
Work on scenarios. Yes, and we have many technologies that can help us model and look at different scenarios.
Yes, Petros rightfully mentioned before.
Petros.
If the policymakers are Greeks, or I would tell them to risk in investing in science, and I would like them to think of the usefulness of useless knowledge. This is something that is very, very important. It's worth risking.
Nico, the closing word.
For me, it's creating an environment, an ecosystem. I would say within the, how can I say, the nation, I would say, or country, where in some way there is this connection of innovators also with institutions that close one close to the other. So I think this is really key. So in some way, we should work with them for creating also a mindset of innovation, but also an environment that is safe also for taking risk and innovate.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. That was really enlightening. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.